Hi, my name is Bill Buskus, and I'm a professor of psychology at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. And I have the best job in the world. There's not a better job that I could imagine myself falling into than being a university professor. And the reason why it's such a great job is because I've got total freedom to do what I want to do, to think about what I want to do, to plan my day the way I want it to go. There is no real typical day as a university professor because you're involved in so many different activities. Sometimes you're doing research, sometimes you're writing up research, sometimes you're preparing for class, sometimes you're teaching class, sometimes you're meeting with students in your office, sometimes you're running them across campus. When you get up on a typical morning, you don't know where the day is going to end, and that's what's so exciting for me. Particularly being a teacher, it's really living on the edge. Teaching occurs in real time. You never know what students are going to say, what mood they're going to be in, what's going to happen to you, how it's going to affect the class dynamics. So it's a wonderful, wonderful way to live a life, to have this kind of freedom that you just don't find in typical jobs. It's certainly not a 9-to-5 job where you get up, got to put on your suit, go into the office, go through the day doing things that other people want you to do, and then you leave at the end of the day tired and exhausted. When I leave at the end of my day, I'm charged. I'm excited about life because it's been a great day, because I've had so many different good things happen to me in class, in my writing, in my research. My main job at a university as a university professor is to do really 3 things. One is to teach. That's the most important job, at least the way I look at it. And I love teaching. I cannot spend enough time in the classroom. I love preparing for class. I love interacting with students. I love teaching them about what I love, and that's psychology and human behavior. I also do research, which is another very important part of the job, and a lot of my research involves teaching and what makes teachers good teachers, what makes them master teachers. So I can think of a question about teaching one day, I can design the research, and a month later I can be conducting that research, and maybe a year later I can be attending a conference and presenting my results or publishing it in a journal. In addition to teaching and research, we also do what's called service, and this is really sort of a community effort to give back to our university or give back to our college, give back to our colleagues, many of the things that you get by being a university professor. So I sit on very different kinds of committees. I might sit on what's called a curriculum committee, where you think about how to design courses, what courses students really need as times changes. Sometimes I sit on a doctoral dissertation committee, which is where you examine a student and what he or she knows about his or her field on the basis of what they've done in graduate school. So there's a lot of different ways to serve and to give back. But the bottom line is, all of it is fun, and all of it is just incredibly exhilarating. I can't believe that I have the good fortune of doing what I do. So you might want to ask yourself, well, what do I need to do to become a university professor? What have I done? What's the future going to be like for the university professorships? Well, the good news is that I think that colleges and universities are always going to be here. Over time, the job requirements may change, but right now, for the foreseeable future, what's really important is that you focus on getting a good quality undergraduate degree, that you set up your basis for your life, and you take your education in your bachelor's degree very, very seriously. That puts you in a great position to further your education, because you really can't work at a university as a professor unless you have at least a master's degree, preferably a PhD. So it's important that you work hard as an undergraduate to get your grades up, to get involved in many extracurricular activities as you can related to your field, join the club of your discipline, those kinds of things, and interact with the teachers, get to know your teachers. And in some fields it's important that you move into sort of a laboratory position where you take an assistantship as a research assistant and help a person conduct his or her research. All these things make you look really good on your application to graduate school. Once you're in graduate school, the work only gets more interesting, and of course it gets a little bit more challenging, because now there's a higher expectation of what you're going to be able to do. As an undergraduate, many of us think we just sit in the classroom, we listen, we take notes, and then we regurgitate on an examination. That is the way much undergraduate education, unfortunately, is in this country. But once you get to the master's level PhD, then you begin doing. You move into the field, you conduct research, you conduct interviews. You're actually out on the site doing something in your field that's relevant. The better prepared you are to do that kind of work, the better prepared you will be to have a university professorship. Getting hired as a university professor requires that you do some other things. You have to fill out a job application requirement packet. There'll be a resume that you fill out. You'll have to do some writing about yourself and what your research interests are, what your teaching interests are, why you want to become a university professor. Then you go through a series of interviews, if you're fortunate enough to get one, based on what you've sent them in your job packet. And then eventually, if you're really fortunate, like I have been, you'll get an offer for a job. And the expectation is that immediately when you start that job, you'll be able to walk into the classroom, be able to teach your area of expertise, you'll be able to establish a research program, you'll be able to attract students, both undergraduates and graduates, to your laboratory or to your fieldwork. So it's not a matter of just getting a master's degree or a PhD. Those are sort of what we call baseline. That's the minimum. You've got to actually have done something valuable during your master's education or your PhD education that makes you really attractive and worthy to get a job in your discipline. If you're interested in a job that gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of control over your time, then you really might want to consider a university professorship or a college professorship or a community college professorship. They're all very similar in that there is just so much room to be creative. There's so many ways to do your work well. You don't have to be on the job all the time. I spend a couple of days each week in my office at home where I write and I think. I prepare a lot of my lectures there. I prepare some of my manuscripts for books and for journals there. You don't have to be on campus all the time because there's so many ways to do your job and to do it well. So if you're a person who really likes that kind of freedom of thought, freedom of time, this is really a good job. I also like the job because you're around people who are smart and they're interesting people. They have great ideas and you get into these conversations with them and you don't know where they're going to end, but you always come up feeling refreshed and energized. And sometimes I get some of my best ideas for how to teach a particular topic or how to research a topic by these conversations I have with them. And when I say colleagues, I also mean my students, because I look at my students as being my junior colleagues, and I look at education as a partnership where we're working on this task of becoming educated together. Most university professors don't feel that they're the end-all of end-alls, that all the knowledge ends with them. Many times the most common things that comes out of my class is, I don't know, or wow, that's an interesting idea, I've never thought of that before. So you have this wonderful energy and synergy with your students. And if you're like me, and of course as you can see, I'm an older person now, I'm in my mid-50s, but if you like being around young people and tapping into that energy that they bring into the classroom with them, into the research laboratory with them, then this is a great opportunity to stay young, at least in your mind. It's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful job, but it's not perfect, as you can imagine. There are things that we as professors do, as much freedom as we have, that are not always pleasant. I think if you ask any teacher what's the worst part of his or her job, they'll say grading. And it is. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of time if you're going to do it well. And sometimes you've got to deliver feedback to students that they don't necessarily hear, but they probably need to hear, because if they're going to be better students, if they're going to be smarter, they need to hear that kind of feedback that may be critical of them. That's a very difficult thing to do, and it took me a couple of years before I was really competent to deliver that kind of feedback in a very positive and supportive manner. Other than the grading and the feedback and the occasional students who get themselves into trouble, who sleep through class or who are confrontive or aggressive sometimes, it's a great job. But all these things that I've mentioned, you can find in other kind of jobs as well. And if I had to do a comparison of being a university professor and being in any other kind of job, except for maybe being a successful novelist, I think you're going to find that the ratio of best to worst is better as a university professor than it is in any other kind of field. Deciding what you want to be when you grow up is a really difficult task. It's really, really difficult. I know I've raised 5 children, and they're all now young adults to early middle-aged adults. And I watched them struggle with the decisions that they made, and I reflect back on the advice that I gave them, and I think it's good advice, and I want to leave this session with you today with that advice. Really just 2 or 3 things, and they're really simple. One is, whatever you do, have fun. That's so important. You have to be happy in life, and if you choose a job because there's a lot of money involved or it's prestigious, but you're not happy, you will be miserable. and you will not like going to that job. I get up every morning ready to work. I tell people I'm the happiest person on my campus because I love so much what I do. So I think being happy is the number one thing. So when you decide on what you want to be when you grow up, make sure you can find some happiness in it. Okay. Second thing is, don't listen to anybody else but yourself. You've got to decide in your heart of hearts what you want to be when you grow up. Mom may want you to be something, Dad may want you to be something, your friends may want to be something. Take their advice, but in the end, you are the one who has to live your life, and you have to live it alone. And what I mean by that is, you have to be able to go home at the end of the day and say, I really love what I do, or I really hate what I do. Don't do something that's so important in life, like choosing a career, because somebody else told you to do it. That's simply really bad advice. The last thing is of equal importance with the first two, and that is, whatever you decide to become the very best at it. Don't take mediocre as an acceptable way to go through life. Make yourself stand out. Find out what it is. Research the job. Find out what the great people in that job do, the people who are really well known, the people who are famous, the people who are really successful. Find out what they do, and then figure out how you can smuggle that kind of behavior, those kinds of attitudes, those kinds of thoughts into your own life to mesh with your personality to make it unique. And I promise you, if you find a way to be happy, if you chart your own course, and if you, in the very end, strive to be the best you possibly can, you will open up doors that you can only imagine about now. It is just tremendous what you can do, what one human life can do if they devote themselves to it. So my advice is to do that.